Oh, hello everyone. I am Natasha Harris. I'll tell you a little bit about myself in a moment, but I'm just so super excited to be here. Thank you to Animas for inviting me to come and talk about this ICF Core Competency, which is all about listening actively. It's a juicy one. It's one that I really do love exploring further with my clients, coaches that I supervise, etc. So just letting a couple more people in. So just to be really aware that we are recording this. Obviously, everything in the breakout rooms will not be recorded. But I do really want to make it interactive. I do really want to, include you. I want to answer questions if anyone has them. But in the chat, can you just let me know where you are, where you're from, where you are sitting in a room, in what location, just so I know where people are kind of coming from. And just to welcome you all in. And for those of you that might know each other, I'm sure not many of you do. So as I said, I'm Natasha Harris. I am an intuitive business coach, activator, and past life healer. So I blend lots of different modalities into my coaching, and I work with conscious business owners really to support them to taking their business to the next level of leadership and impact in a changing world that we are in right now. So lots of people in spare rooms, in attics, from Sweden, but calling from Berlin, amazing. Oxfordshire, from France. Oh, wow, lots of people all over the place, in Kent, in Raleigh, NC, in London suburbia. I'm in London as well, so I'm in northwest London. From Jakarta. Oh my goodness, we're totally international. This is amazing. From Glasgow, Cornwall. Fantastic. So welcome to you all from all over the world. From Edinburgh. So this is really exciting. So I just really want to encourage you to ask questions. We've got 90 minutes, which seems like an awfully long time, but actually I think it's going to go rather quickly. So let's dive in, and let's get started. So listening actively. I'm going to try and share my screen. I'm having a few technical issues with Zoom because they've done an update. So hopefully this will all work. So can you all see my screen? Kat, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Cool, great, thank you. So we're gonna go into breakout rooms. Obviously, as I said, that in breakout rooms, nothing will be recorded. You won't be recorded there. But we just so you'll have an opportunity to chat with people and get to know a few people in the group as well. So we're going to do a couple of breakout rooms. But firstly, I think it's really important that what we do is we actually identify what the core competency of listening actively is all about. Now, it's actually part of a bigger core competency, which is also part of the communicating effectively competency. So people are still coming in and joining, so I'm going to slow down a bit. But the listen actively core competency, really, this is what the ICF states. So I just want to read this out because it's really important to understand the nuances of this. Focuses on what the client is and is not saying. I think that's a really important part, to fully understand what is being communicated in the context of the client systems, because there are many, and to support the client and their self-expression. So this is really kind of broad. There's a lot in that. So it's like focusing and listening on what the client is saying, but also not saying. And often there is so much in that space of what the client isn't saying. And if we really tune in and actively listen, we can kind of pick up things, and it's going to take reliance on your trust and your intuition, which we'll come on to a little bit later as well, to really fully understand what is being communicated and know that we're getting it right, that we're not just making assumptions in this context as well. And the client systems, because the client has so many systems of things that's going on, the context of what they're talking about, the context of the environment that they are sitting in, the context of their beliefs, their values, their cultural backgrounds, all of these things will come into play, and to allow the client to really fully express themselves. So I'm just going to stop sharing because I actually can't see anyone while I've got my screen share on. So it's always nice to see some faces. So what does that bring up for you? What does that kind of like, has anyone, like, what does that bring up for anyone? If you pop that in the chat, let me know, and I'll come on to what comes up for you around that, any of that. It's a lot, and I'm going to break it down in a moment. And see a few people typing. I'm just going to wait for those comments to come in. Exploring under the surface of the iceberg. Wow, I love that, because that's so true, isn't it? There's so much going on below the surface. What we see with our eyes and hear with our ears is not everything that's going on. So that's a really great analogy to think about what's actually going on below the surface and what's going on for us as well in that space. Like we're in that space with the client. So somebody says, I need to tune into more of what my clients are not saying. Yeah, and that's not always easy. And trusting that we can hear something in the silence, and trusting that we are able to reflect that back to the client in a way that is open, inquisitive, really encouraging, but asking permission in that as well. Is it okay that I reflect something back? Somebody else says, it's not just the words that the client is saying, but facial expressions, other physical gestures as well. Absolutely. It's like I basically have my everything written on my face. Like, people always say that to me. I have to be really aware of my own expressions and what that might be conveying to the client as well. But yeah, so often we can attach meaning to something, an expression on someone's face, a gesture that they make, a thinking, and we can attach a certain meaning to that. But are we actually correct? And actually trusting ourselves then to ask, oh, I've noticed this. Like, what is that about? Tell me a little bit more about that. So yeah, absolutely. It goes beyond just what is not being said, but physical gestures as well. So somebody says that resonates so much, as I use a lot of hand gestures and facial expressions. Yeah, you can tell I talk with my hands. I'm very emotive. I love to be expressive in things, but sometimes that can be conveyed because we all read expressions very, very differently. Focus on what the client is thinking, but not necessarily saying. I find that clients talk, but aren't always thinking, or are thinking, but not talking. Yes. So how comfortable are we in the silence to allow that process of thinking that's going on? It's the thought that counts, and listening, watching catches this. Yeah. So this is really, really important. So great reflections there. So I'm just going to go down into, oh, excuse me. So what are the benefits of listening actively then? And how have you seen this actually happen? So what do you think are some of those benefits, and where have you seen the power of when you've really tapped into that in your own coaching practice? I'm not sure how to make my screen smaller, but hopefully. So let me know, what do you think the benefits are in that space? The light bulbs going on. Yeah, so we can really see, and often clients talking it's just a moment of expression. And like, I know that sometimes when I'm talking something through, I get those moments of clarity. I'm like, oh, right. Yeah, that I hadn't thought about. The aha moment. Conversations slow down. Yes, absolutely. Noticing the incongruence and gently naming it. Yeah, so there's something about the gently, isn't there? And being really gentle. I like to think about holding things lightly in the space. I really love that analogy. That works really well for me in terms of like not needing to go in, not desiring to go in, but really holding it lightly in the space, and how we can hold things and reflect that back, but in a very light, gentle way, but not avoiding naming it. Being seen, yes, reflecting back words or phrases that have been repeated, but not necessarily consciously by the client. Oh, yes, I was talking to a client about this actually recently. And sometimes we, and I know when I'm being coached or I'm being supervised and I'm talking, and the client will, my coach will say, or my supervisor will say and reflect something back to me as I've said it. And I've been like, oh, have I said that? Did I really truly say that? oh my goodness. And the power, the realization in those words of, oh my goodness, I did say that. I would have missed that entirely, because words are powerful. The words that we use are really powerful. So reflecting back that power of that word, of the words, and when we truly listen, we can really reflect back the words and the language that the client uses, not talk around that. So reflecting back words and phrases that have been repeated but not necessarily conscious by the client. Client feels heard and understood. Yeah, totally. I always used to be amazed. So when I used to do more mindfulness coaching many, many years ago, and clients were coming to me, and there was, a lot of stuff going on for them. I really found that even in an initial consultation, that clients would feel so emotional by just being listened to, by holding the space for them to be heard, for hearing them, reflecting back things they've said, for truly listening and understanding. People found that so emotional, because we don't truly listen. In our society, we don't often listen. We like to butt in, and this is in conversation with friends, with family, if we think about it. And it's not about coaching anyone, but how often do we feel ourselves not being heard in a conversation? Somebody comes in, oh yeah, I've got this experience, and we feel shut down. So when we allow that in the space for a client in the coaching space, it is beyond powerful. It really is. So when someone seems to be tiptoeing around the issue, inviting them to gently to really claim and express their feelings about it, magic to see them step into the light of that moment. Isn't it just? Isn't it? And we can only really do that when we're listening, when we really have got the client and we've understood and we've reflected back and we've kind of allowed ourselves to really understand what's going on in that space. So great reflection. Thank you, everybody, for that. That's really useful. So I hope you can all start to see that there is a real depth and a real richness about this. So seeing the power in it, having experienced the power, who finds, just yes or no, who finds it, do you find it really difficult to listen actively? Is it something that comes quite naturally to you, or do you find it quite challenging? It's like, yes, I find it. So sorry, the question is, do you find it easy? Yes or no? Just to get a gauge of where you feel you are on this. Find it easy? Yes. Lots of yeses, great. But have to concentrate. Yeah, so sometimes we have to really focus on that and being present. So I know if a few of you did the Lunch and Learn a few days ago with Marcus, the presence module would have been amazing. He's incredible at that. And that's very important. All these things go hand in hand. But in areas of constant improvement, absolutely, there's always room for improvement, and depends on my mindset. Thank you for that, because it's what do we bring to the space? How able are we in that moment to be really actively listening? We're human as well. Our minds wander off to the next question, and we kind of realize, oh, I just totally missed that last 30 seconds or 5 seconds, and we could have missed something really important in that. I guess that coaches are typically aligned to be good listeners. Yes and no. I've had experiences where coaches have really not been very good listeners, and I think it is a practice that we develop, and we have the ability to explore and to grow that and to explore how we can do it better. That's what I love about being in the coaching world and my own personal development. Where's my edge of growth? What else can I learn? How can I do this slightly better? How can I deepen my understanding of what all of these competencies mean? So it really is really powerful when we really explore that. So yeah, I've heard from other people that it's not always the case. Especially when I'm curious. So curiosity is absolutely key to that, growing in the yes. And it's easy, we're all growing, we're all evolving, we're all expanding into that. So there is no right and wrong, and it's okay to say that we haven't mastered it. We are always learning. Every time I teach through the ICF mentoring programs that I run, when I teach these competencies, there's always a little nugget for me as well. In everything I teach, it's like there's always something where I can learn and grow as well. So thank you so much for all your contributions, so valuable. So these are the more specifically the ICF core competencies, and I'm just going to run through these as well. So it's considering the client's context, identity, environment, experiences, values, and beliefs to enhance the understanding of what the client is communicating. So this is like, oh, we have talked and we've touched on these things, and you're going to get into breakout rooms shortly just to really to discuss this all these points further. So reflects or summarizes what the client communicated to ensure clarity, understanding. So when we truly listen, we can reflect back really accurately and summarize really accurately what might be going on for the client, and then take that level of learning even deeper. So we also recognize and inquire when there is more to what the client is communicating. So that again is like noticing and witnessing what the client's not saying, what else is going on in the space, where might they be distracted, where might something else be going on, what are their gestures, their expressions, their movements saying about how uncomfortable or comfortable they are, and really allowing yourself and trusting and leaning into that space that you're able to reflect that back to a client. I picked up on something with a client this week where they were very fidgety when I was asking certain questions, and very gently holding it beautifully lightly, I was able to reflect that back to their client, and the level of depth we went to in the rest of that session was like, it was mind-blowing. It was incredible. And had I not been able to, or trusted in myself just to ask permission and reflect back to the client, we probably wouldn't have gone so powerfully and so deeply into the session, further into the session. These are all on the website, on the ICF website, by the way. So if you're trying to note these down, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if we're going to be sharing slides, but I'm happy to do that if that's possible. So we want to notice and acknowledge and explore the client's emotions, their energy shifts, their non-verbal cues and other behaviors. And again, we've explored that. And I love that they've included in the ICF energy shifts. So somebody who's an intuitive healer, I work very much around the energy, and I can really spot energetic shifts. I can sense when somebody's energy is just brightened a little bit, when they've got that moment of clarity, and I can drop that into the space and notice that and work with the client to explore what that might be and what that might mean. So integrates the client's words, tones of voice, body language to determine the full meaning of what's being communicated. So there is now, I'm not very good with percentages and numbers, but our words is a very small percentage. So if anyone knows this statistic, I'd love you to just pop it into the chat. But our words are actually a very small percentage of the communication. Everything else is in the tone of voice, is in the body language, is in the words we not only the words we use, but it's in everything else in how we communicate. But it's actually a surprisingly small percentage of our communication is through words. We notice trends in the client's behaviors as well, and emotions across sessions to discern themes and patterns. So we can really sort of pull patterns together and really sort of then ask and reflect back to the client what might be going on there. You've noticed these over a few sessions, you're using these words, you're using these phrases. What does that actually mean? So 7%. Oh, okay. I actually thought I was going to say 10%. So, and I thought maybe that's not doing it justice, but 7% is really not very much at all, is it? You know, and we think about all of those other things. So this is really heightening our own senses, our intuition, our other senses other than just what we hear. It's our intuition, it's what we see, it's what we feel in that moment as well. So that was around that. So what I would love you to do is to get out into breakout rooms. Let me just check where we are with time. We're pretty good, actually. That's fine. Has anyone got any questions? Any thoughts at this point? And what I'd love you to do is is to really to get into breakout rooms and to discuss these things further, so you can have an opportunity to speak these out, because words are powerful, and when we get an opportunity to really communicate through voice, then that can be really powerful as well. So we're going to get into groups of 4. I'm just gonna share my screen again, sorry. So what challenges come up for you around this? This is what I would love you to explore in your groups of 4. What challenges do come up? What emotions, what feelings come up? How do you also feel about silence? So if you want to maybe make a note of these, if you want to make a note of these questions. So what challenges, what feelings, what emotions come up around you really actively listening deeply through all of your senses? And how do you feel about the silences that, and allowing silence? Where do you start to feel uncomfortable perhaps in silence? So this is really what I'd love you to explore between you, what you learn from each other in these in this discussion as well. What's kind of like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that. So I really want you to use these 15 minutes to really explore what this is. Any questions about that? So someone, Kat, has just said they can't interact. So I'm not sure. Are we even numbers?
Actually, with Lucy unable to interact, we will have 4 people in every room.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Okay, cool. If you have any questions in the breakout room, remember you're not being recorded in the breakout room. Everything you say is completely confidential. So I just want to reassure you. But if you have any questions, or you're kind of not sure, then just pop your hand, raise your hand, and just let us know if you've got a question. We can, either Kat or I will pop in and yeah, help you out. Was it related to silence? Both questions. So yeah, so just really, also the third question is also about silence. So, you know, how do you feel about the silence? How long can you hold silence for? Does that feel really uncomfortable? And we're going to do a little exercise a bit later on, so we're going to really get to explore this and what it feels like. Okay, cool. Thanks, Kat. Great. So I would love to hear from a few of you what kind of came up in that discussion. So if you want to just raise your electronic hand, Kat and I will just have a look around the screen and just see what you'd like to share. Remember that we're all learning in this space, but would love to hear from a couple of you about what really what were the challenges? What did you kind of recognize? What did you perhaps learn from someone else? How is that silence? So a few raised hands, come on. Pop it in the chat as well for those of you that don't want to. Really would love to know. So for those of you that are not happy to talk, then please pop your thoughts into the chat and I will reflect back with those with you. But it's always lovely to have a conversation. Great, a few raised hands. Irene, you popped your hand up first. Hello.
Hello. So we were discussing that sometimes the clients could give us a lot of detail, and that kind of make us lost in the train of thought. That how can we stay present and still be active listening? And my idea is that I think it's important for me as to observe and serve. That's the kind of the mantra that I give it to myself. So what's the purpose of these details that the clients they are providing, and what does it mean to the client, and how can I make the best of use of those details and information that I'm gathering now? And that's the question that keeps me present and in conversation, and keeps me thinking in the silence.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Observe and serve, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's so wonderful, because that really does give ourselves permission just to be in the space where clients might be going off in all sorts of tangents. Who's had that, where clients are like running around in all sorts of directions? You're like, what on earth is going on? But just being in that with them and reflecting and really noticing what comes up for you in that space, where a client is just like, all over the shot, and how that feels for you and what the client must be going through, and then being able to just reflect back some of those patterns. It's not even always in the very detail of what the client is saying, but in just the observation of what is going on in their thought process and in their communication of their thought process. That's really powerful. Observe and serve. I love that. I might use that one myself. Thank you for that. Beautiful. Derek.
Hi, thanks, Natasha. Can you hear me?
That's all right. Hi.
Hi. We were talking about thinking, so the thought process, connecting back to what Irene just said, and I guess 2 points there. One is that it's okay if you've got somebody who batters on, it's okay to interrupt their talking, but don't interrupt their thinking. And the only way you're going to determine which is which is by watching them like a hawk and not taking notes and all the good things that coaches love to do.
Yeah.
Equally, on the other side of that, it's okay to, if you've got someone who's very mechanistic and they answer a question and then stop. There's nothing wrong with promoting thinking out of silence and saying to them, coaching's all about you thinking, so do so, please. You know, so maybe there's a middle ground to be held there.
Yeah, not interrupt their thinking. I like that, because so much goes on, and we sometimes feel that silence is like, oh, we've got to fill the space, or it's uncomfortable, and really like not interrupting the thinking process, because I know sometimes I need to really think quite deeply about certain things. And if a question comes in that's not related to where my train of thought has just gone in a totally different direction, the question then just really interrupts my thinking, and I was just about to come to a light bulb moment, and that's just gone because it just got stopped or pipped, you know, at the post. So yeah, really, thank you, Derek. That's really insightful as well. Thank you. Mark.
We had a couple of threads of conversation, really. One was about the things that can interrupt our concentration, and in the context of the environment that we're coaching within. So, for example, you know, if we're coaching in a cafe, then there's all sorts of external distractions that can get in the way of that. But we were also talking about things like if you're coaching at home, the doorbell might go, there might be a delivery, or if you're coaching on Zoom, you might have forgotten to switch your emails off, and all these emails are popping up on your screen that are distracting you. So it's kind of that kind of external stuff to be mindful about, I guess. But we also had a conversation around silence and how the kind of the eye contact relationship to silence, and then somebody in our group was talking about kind of having a awareness of different cultures and how long you can maintain eye contact with some people before it becomes inappropriate or uncomfortable. And we were talking about from one of the previous competency sessions, the notion of actually, when you're contracting an agreement with your clients, to actually just start with a blank sheet of paper and not have a template form. And actually that enables you, in the context of what I was just saying, to, you know, to kind of understand from the client's perspective those sorts of cultural things, because we can't be culturally competent with everybody. So, you know, perhaps treating everybody individually than trying to stick them into a community box and actually just ask them what's going to work for them. You know, and maybe have a conversation about silence. You know, there will be times when we're going to be silent. If we're on Zoom, you know, do you want to switch your video off while you're having 5 minutes to think, and then come back into the space when you've had that time? Or, you know, just kind of be very much led by them, but maybe think about that contracting stage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And how you contract all of that stuff. And I sometimes know that, you know, this whole new environment of working on Zoom, and you're absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that into the space. You know, deliveries coming, and like you get a message 10 minutes before, oh, your delivery is going to be done between this time and this time. You're like, oh, that's right when my client is. And just naming it and just contracting that at the beginning. If the doorbell rings, you know, I am expecting a delivery, but just so you know, that's what it is, but don't worry about it. We'll ignore it. Just so you can preempt these things, so it's not like, oh, you know, that moment of like, oh no, the doorbell's ringing, have they noticed? Is that going to disturb the space? So just letting that in. So thank you for bringing that in, because it's so true. You know, things go on, you know, dogs start barking if you've got dogs, cats come in and jump in front of the screen. Don't they, cats? So, you know, sometimes we can't always control our environment so perfectly that nothing else happens. So it's really important to think that. And you also mentioned something about the eye contact, which I think is really, really important as well. And thank you for that, because eye contact can be very difficult. And I think when we're sitting in a room or in a cafe, you know, we can have those distractions around us as well. But like we, you know, eye contact is because we're in contact with their whole body, whereas on Zoom, we're very much focused on someone's face. So when we're listening intently, sometimes we're like, oh, so we are focusing and watching them so intently. And how does that feel on the other side? So it's really, you know, key to notice that, you know, what feels comfortable and what we think we're really concentrating on, we're actively listening. But how is that being perceived from the other side? Do people feel vulnerable in being looked at for that period of time? So that's a really important, actually something I hadn't quite considered to that depth. So thank you so much for that, because that is a consideration I think we do need to think about in that space. Lovely. So anyone else has got anything that they would like to add? Yes, Fiona, hello. And just one more hand if anyone else has got something, and then we will move on.
Hi, Natasha. We discussed that sort of with the active listening, sort of it's emotionally draining if you're doing it. You feel exhausted by the end of it. So and you know that you are giving yourself completely and utterly to your client in that space, and at the end of it, it's like, wow, gosh, you know, I am actually exhausted by that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I'd love to hear how other people feel about that in the chat. Just if you've got any words of wisdom or anything that sort of comes up for you around that. I think for me, if I might just share, I have to say, I don't find that exhausting, because I mentioned the analogy that I hold is like holding it lightly. I'm not using, like, I know when I'm thinking, I'm like using a lot of energy. When I'm holding the space, I'm gripping, not much is relaxed about me. But when I hold that lightly and recognize that I'm human, I might miss some things, but I'll catch what's important. I trust myself. I'm using my intuition throughout this process. I actually feel quite energized from when I'm holding the space. I kind of like, it's like, here's the space. Some stuff might come up. It might be emotional. It might be fun. It might be curious. It might be really expansive. But whatever comes up, I can just hold that lightly. And therefore, I am in lightness as well. So I don't feel that exhaustion and tiredness. So perhaps, hopefully that might help a little bit. I don't know if anyone else has got anything. Oh yeah, as an introvert, I can find it exhausting for sure. Do my best to schedule breaks between sessions and not too many a day. That's like absolutely key. Yeah, to ensure I have time to fill my energy back up when I need it. Yeah, so like, what do you need to do? Go outside. You know, I love to be out in nature, so I might just go for a little walk around the block if I need just some fresh air. Make sure I have breaks. My calendar is set up so that I have a half an hour break between sessions, so clients cannot book. I have at least half an hour between, and that gives me time to just wind down, just have a cup of tea, have a drink, go to the loo, just refresh myself, go out for a little walk if I need it. So yeah, thank you. That's really, really important as well. Thanks. Does that help? I've lost you on my screen, Fiona. Does that help? Yes? Okay, great. But thank you. That's really important. And I think as you practice these things and you put in place things that support your energy, then you start to really build your confidence around that. So it is something to practice and build into what you do. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Sam, hi.
Hi, Natasha.
Hey.
Ours was something we discussed in our room that was actually outside of the coaching space. That we spent all this time in our ecosystem developing these skills, and then taking that out into the real world where, you know, conversational terrorism is rife. like being patient about just having conversations with people, but being interrupted or not feeling heard in our own, you know, nourishing conversations outside of our space.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we do it everywhere. It's everywhere. How do we listen? How do we, you know, when we're going out for dinner with our mates, when we're, you know, when we're just connecting, even if it is with family on Zooms, like, how do we really listen in that? So yeah, it's everywhere. Thank you for that, Sam. Cool. So let me just have an eye on the time. There's just one more thing I would love to do before we go out into the breakout rooms again. So we've kind of touched on this, like what helps you. We've kind of you know, given little sound bites of what helps and what in those challenges when we're listening, when we feel our energy is depleted. But if you've got any other sort of tips, things that you know really help you, then pop those into the chat, because and I will read those out. So what else helps you in those moments where you know, find listening or find those challenges helpful? What allows you to come back to that active listening, to that space when your energy is being used up in the wrong direction, perhaps? I have post-it notes that say wait. I love that. I'm a fan of post-it notes. Got about 5 on my desk right now. Really good reminders, like, wait, why am I talking? Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for that. Really good. A fan of post-it notes. They really are, because and when they're colorful, they kind of catch your attention just at the right moment. And you think, oh yeah, of course, that's why I put that there. So if you want to keep just anything else that comes to you, pop it in the chat and I'll share it as we go on. But I really wanted to talk into trust, because this is I find one of the fundamental basis of really being able to actively listen, to really trusting yourself, putting trust in the client and in the space of as we've talked about, and really like the level of trust in yourself. So how, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm just curious, how much do you trust yourself in the coaching space? Not just around the listening, but like as a skill, like on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 not being very much. I won't read your names out. 10 being like, yeah, fully trust myself. 9 out of 10. What else? How much do you trust yourself? 7, 9, lovely. 7, 8. Feel it's increasing. Yes, and that's it. It's practice. 7.5. I love the half. 8, 7. So pretty high for many of you, like 7 or 8. Brilliant, you know. And it's like, how do we like build on that trust, that knowledge that we have, that we are always learning and growing as we become you know, as we become, you know, better coaches, we get more practice, we get more hours, sometimes a 6 out of 10. Yeah. So it's just recognizing where we're at in that space, and that it will fluctuate. Sometimes it will be lower. It will depend what's going on for us in our own lives, in our own world, outside of our practice and outside of our clients, that, you know, our trust can waver. Sometimes it can be really high. Sometimes it can be a bit lower. Sometimes some clients challenge us a little bit more than others, and recognizing that our trust in ourselves wavers if that's the case. So really recognizing the trust in yourself, your trust in your client. Where would you say that is out of 10? How much do you trust your clients that they have the answers within? Or do you have a sense of that you need to ask the clever question, that you need to ask the question that's going to give it to them? So your trusting is high, all 10s. I love it. Fantastic. So this is it. It's recognizing that there's a difference between how you trust yourself and how you trust the client. And what might actually happen if you trusted yourself as much as you trusted your client? What might happen there? Because these are much higher. And why are your clients more deserving of trust than you are deserving of your own trust? Yeah. So yeah, sometimes we interrupt at the wrong moments, lose trust in myself in the process. Yeah, and it's just about building that muscle. Like, when do we speak up? Like, also in the space, I was talking about this with a supervision client as well. It's like, we talk too much. Sometimes we try to listen too hard, too much. And you know, as you said, you know, it's like that can feel exhausting. It's like, am I trying too hard? Like, am I trying to think about the clever question? How focused are you? Sometimes our mind can go, oh, there's a great question there. And then we're like, oh, something's moved on. And then we forget it. And then, oh no, I forgot what that question was. And I have to get back to that question, rather than listening in that space and saying, okay, maybe that moment has passed for that question. Maybe there's a different question that's just waiting to be asked in a moment. So trusting ourselves really does allow ourselves to go deeper, I believe. We can really like quieten down the mind chatter that's going on. I'm not really sure we ever eliminate it, because we are thinking. We're coming up with questions. We're coming up with things. So our minds will be active, but is it chatter, or is it a quiet sense of what I would call like an intuitive hit? Like, do you trust your intuition? How often do you lean into when you've got a little niggling intuition that you actually do speak it, you do reflect it back to the client? And intuition and trust are very much linked. And I think they're very much needed in this space. And I also think that all of these competencies, you know, through the ICF, as if you've been doing them up until now and beyond this, that, you know, they all interlink and they all intertwine. We can't do one and then do the next competency. They're all interlinked with each other. So are you able to trust your own intuition and reflect back to the client in those moments? How often, so out of 10, like how often do you really listen to your intuition, trust it enough and act on it? What is your score out of 10 on that? Do you do it most of the time, all of the time? Do you give yourself a hard time when you don't do it? A lot of the time, 7, 8, 9. You're all doing amazing. Cool. 8 out 7, 9. But just recognizing these things and recognizing, you know, where you are as a coach in these skills. I think often we don't give ourselves enough credit. We're willing to look at the times where we're like, oh, my confidence isn't great, I'm not doing something right. But actually, when we recognize actually where we score ourselves and actually we're not where we might think we are, and like really celebrating where we are in those things is just as key. So thank you for all your thoughts and your sharings. And we're going to go into breakout rooms. So we're going to go into pairs. Hopefully, maybe we have a pair, maybe we do have pairs. And we're going to have a practice. So we're going to give you 22 minutes in total. So you're going to have about 10 minutes each. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes extra just so you can like just be in that space. And we're going to come out at the end and we're going to have a quick discussion in the last 10 minutes and answer any questions that you have as well. But the purposes of this is that you get 10 minutes each, 9-10 minutes each, to really explore something that's coming up for you in any life area and something you just want to get off your chest, and to talk for 5 to 7 minutes and just talk. And then the other person in the pair is listening, actively listening, and really not interrupting, not saying anything, not asking any questions, just allowing you to talk. Okay, so somebody's going to be the client, somebody's going to be the coach, and then you're going to swap. Okay, so 5 to 6, 7 minutes talking, getting something off your chest. During that space, I want you to really notice what's going on for you as the client, the one talking, and the coach, the one listening. What feels uncomfortable? Do you want to make noises? Do you want to keep making gestures? Nothing is right or wrong. I just want you to notice what you are wanting to do. Do you want to talk? Do you want to ask a question? How easy is it for you? How difficult is it for you? And then in the remaining 3 minutes, or 4 minutes, just for you to feed back to each other. What happened for you as the coach? What happened for you as the client? And then swap and do the process again. So let's say 6 minutes of talking, 4 minutes of feedback, and then you've got a couple of minutes extra at the end. So you both get an opportunity in each part to feed back to each other what's going on. And I would love to know what's going on for you. What happens as you're talking? Does it just feel so uncomfortable to just talk? Can you sit there in silence and be in your thoughts and just allow yourself? Would you feel a need to just continuously talk because there's space? So just to get a feeling of this, a really just fun, light, no pressure, no right or wrong way. It's just a witnessing and an observation exercise. Any questions about that for anyone? So we've only got like 8-9 minutes left for today, but I really would, that was so powerful. Thank goodness. Thank you. Who would like, a couple of people, I'd love to hear your comments in the chat, but if a couple of people would like to share, like put your electronic hand up. I would love to hear how that was. I really would. I'm glad you found that powerful. What did you find powerful about it, Melanie? Such a great experience. Oh, phew. Slightly breathing a sigh of relief here. Cool. Anybody would like to share? I'd love just a little bit of feedback. Go on, Sandy. Thank you. Hello.
Hi. I think both of us, well, I certainly had the experience both ways of it would have been helpful for a question. And when I was coach, I really wanted to say, what is your experience in your body? But that wasn't the task. But I think that would have been helpful.
Yeah.
But I had no problem just listening, and it was nice being listened to as well.
Yeah. So how did you find it just being listened to in that way?
Fine, I'm used to it, I think. You know, but
that's good.
It's it was lovely. I felt fully seen and accepted, and I could just be with the upset with no judgments anywhere. And it was nice. It was lovely, in fact. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was just about really seeing what it would be like on both sides of the spectrum or both sides of the coin to see really what that brings up and the desire to want to ask a question. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just noticing that there is the desire to want to do that and how that comes up for you. Started with something specific, but the space and silence allowed me to open up and express how I was feeling more broadly. Yeah, that can be quite powerful because sometimes we think we have something on our mind that we want to get off our chest, and then actually it can be something more than that. And if we're given the space to allow it, then it can be really, really powerful, because then we can, rather than going down one avenue where you start, I guess, is that what you mean? That you can kind of go off on different tangents. Oh, somebody's raised their hand. Hi, Yvonne.
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
I really enjoyed being the person who was listening, and the feedback that we had afterwards was the fact that because I think we forget that. I think what you talked about at the beginning, Natasha, about the non-verbal communication, and I found myself smiling in certain places, and she said she felt acknowledged when I smiled. So I really enjoyed being the person who was doing the listening. And then when it was my turn to speak, I didn't speak for long, but the silence, I actually enjoyed it because it gave me this space again to think, but I didn't feel like I had to say anymore. So that was quite good.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you, Yvonne. Really appreciate that. Melanie?
Yeah, so I found that incredibly powerful, and I want to do that again and again, because in a way, being told not to ask a question, I felt the pressure was off me to be thinking, oh my God, what question have I got to ask here? So I was with Irene, and I just noticed her tone of voice, her body language, how her head was tilted. I noticed so much more, which I already thought I was noticing. And so just by doing that exercise, it's made me realize, yeah, I'm probably self-talking too much with, okay, I've got all this information. What question do I need to ask here? What, that just, I don't know. You can see I'm really excited.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
It just gave me a reminder that, yeah, trust in the client, trust and know what they're thinking and going through. And it's not for me to assume or lead, or I don't know. I just really love that. That was a fantastic exercise and
Brilliant.
Really, really good. Yeah.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. And yes, it's just to see what else, I love that you notice what you might actually be missing in that space where you're thinking about needing to answer a question. Also, that kind of relieved the pressure from you to like, oh, I don't need to ask a question. I'm just here to witness, and just really allowing that. So thank you for that. That's really beautiful. Looking forward to hearing maybe how often you end up doing this, but it can be really, really powerful. So thank you, everybody. I know we're coming up to like right bang on the hour and a half. So I want to just say thank you so much for joining me today. I am happy to stay on. We will stop recording, but I'm happy to stay on for 5 minutes if you've got any other questions or you want to ask me anything, and we will stop the recording. But I do just want to say, thank you so much. I'm going to pop my website in the chat. You're so welcome. And just pop up if you've got anything. Just pop up a final slide. Just that if you have questions, if you've got any thoughts, there's my website, my email address. If you are looking to get ICF mentoring, I run a group mentoring program with Marcus Stone and Emily Johnston, who are also Animas trainers. Marcus did the presence module a couple of days ago. We've got a new group starting in February. We've already got a few people signed up for that. So if you are looking to get your ICF credentials and you want to find out a little bit more, on that link and on my website is all the information to that. If you're interested in supervision, if you're interested in business coaching and working in a more intuitive, flowing kind of way, and you want to know how I work, then please do reach out. Let's have a conversation and see if it's the right fit for you. But if you just have a question and you want to ask me something, I'd also love to hear from you. So do let me know. So thank you again, everybody. I have really, really enjoyed today, much more than I thought I would. I've loved your interactions, your thoughts, your questions, and your sharing. So I really appreciate that so much. So as I said, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes if you want to ask me anything.